This is more Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to tell you what I think of the new Nissan Z prototype. Nissan just revealed a sort of concept car, kind of prototype-y version of the next Z car, the replacement for the 370Z, and today I'm going to give you my thoughts. Okay, before I get started, this is not my car. It is a special car. You will see it in a video coming up, but it's just a press car. I don't normally take press cars, but due to COVID, I've had to rely on them a little bit more. So that's this. You're free to guess what you think it is. Maybe it's obvious, I don't really know. Anyway, let's talk Z. I'm gonna start by going over some of the basics of the Z prototype, which they're calling just the Nissan Z Proto for some reason. And then I'm gonna tell you what I think of it. So let's get started. Okay, so first off, the styling. And again, I'm gonna save my opinions for just a couple of minutes from now. I wanna kind of go through just the basics so everybody knows what page we're on here. Nissan went with sort of a retro modern look here. Which makes sense. You know, the Z lineup has created some really beautiful cars over the years. The original Datsun Z car all the way to the Z32. So they wanted to kind of tie in some of that beautiful stuff from back in the day, but they also wanted to bring in some newer 350Z and 370Z for continuity, and they've done that. And so there's some retro and there's some modern, and there's a sprinkling of a few Z cars in the exterior. Now inside, the interior is actually pretty straightforward. I actually had to chuckle during the live reveal of this car on Tuesday. The Nissan guy who was presenting said, and now we bring this futuristic technology, the gauge cluster screen into the car. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is futuristic for Nissan. Everybody else has been using it for like 6 years now. Nissan is just so far behind. But it's, again, pretty straightforward interior. 2 screens, one in the center, one in the gauge cluster, 2 seats, some gauges above the center vents and the infotainment screen, and it has the all-important manual transmission. Again, more on my thoughts in a minute. Now, under the hood, Nissan says only this. Okay, we know it's rear-wheel drive. We know manual transmission. Nissan has said twin-turbo V6. They haven't said which V6. They haven't said how much power it will have. But that's what they've said, twin-turbo V6. Again, my opinion in just a second. As for the launch date, Nissan calls this a prototype, but they're pretty clear about this. They're gonna make the car. It's not finalized, this design, but the final production car will go on sale in 2021. It's only a year from now. It'll go on sale as a 22 model. So this isn't that far off at all, so this must be pretty finalized. So those are the basics, the new Nissan Z car. Now I'm going to give you my opinions, my thoughts on the Z Proto. I'm gonna start with the styling. I like it. In fact, I like it a lot. Generally. I think the overall design is very good, very modern, and most importantly, it's very clean. A lot of automakers over the last few years have gone to this new trend where cars are fussy and there are gouges and cuts and all these excessive styling details to try to get their point across. Giant grills and exaggerated character lines, and it was all been kind of a lot. And frankly, I always thought these cars were kind of over-styled. But between the new Land Rover Defender, the new Jeep Gladiator, the new Bronco, the Polestar, and Volvo models, I'm hoping maybe we might be entering an era of simplicity, where you don't have to have as much excessiveness of design to get your point across in the future. And I sort of like the simple interpretation here. Designers seem to be starting to realize that their car designs can say just as much when they're simple as when they're not. So the Z has like a nice, clean, simple look, and it looks good because of it. But okay, I like the design generally, but there are still some issues worth mentioning, some details. One, good, I love the taillights. The taillights bring back the look of the Z32 300ZX taillights. These horizontal stripes, very cool, looks good. It's a neat thing, and I think this might be the first retro design feature we've seen that recalls a 90s car. Most retro design features, they look at 60s cars, 70s cars, kind of the heyday of car design. I think this might be the first 90s car retro feature on a new car, and it looks cool, and I like how it looks. Conversely, I'm not a fan of the headlights. They're too generic, they're too simple, they're not distinctive enough to me. But as far as the front end is concerned, the headlights are a minor point. To me, the biggest low point on the front end, the whole car, is undoubtedly the grille. You have this simple, flowy car design, very beautiful, and then you come to the front and there's this massive horizontal rectangle grille in the front. It's just a big square, and it doesn't fit with the design of the car at all. It's just too excessive, too square, if you will. To me, it's the biggest low point of the entire look. Now, I think the grille is there to recall the old Z car, the old Z cars from the 70s. If you look back on the Datsun Z cars, they had also a very big grille up front, and I think Nissan thought that would make sense here to kind of tie the design together. It worked then, because it's kind of a retro car, it works now. But the issue here is the grille on the old Z cars is broken up by a silver bumper that went across the entire front, which this car doesn't have. And of course, you can't get away with exterior silver bumpers anymore. And so you kind of need that bumper to minimize the look of the big grille. It's just not ideal being just a massive grille in the center, in my opinion. So to me, that's the only downside, though, really, of the look of this car. Everything else, I think, looks really good, and I think it was a well-done, well-executed design. Now, next up, inside the car. I like the interior. It's good to see a big center screen and the gauge cluster screen. I'm glad to see, like I said, Nissan is finally joining the rest of us in 2020. The 3 gauges above the climate vent in the middle, they're a nice throwback to older Z cars, which had something similar. But mostly, I just like the simplicity of the interior. It kind of recalls the Subaru BRZ and the Scion FRS. There's no crazy lines and excessive character, again, just like on the outside. And inside, it's simple, it's focused, it looks good, just like, in my opinion, a driver's car should. There was no insanity or excessiveness in design here. But let's talk about the rest, which to me is actually more interesting. One, the engine. Nissan says twin-turbo V6. A lot of people are reporting this will be the twin-turbo V6 that's already in the Infiniti Q50 Red Sport 400, which has 400 horsepower. And so they're going to call it the 400Z. That's the thinking. That would be great. That is a great engine. And it's not currently hooked to a manual transmission. And I wonder if maybe they got a manual for the Z now for that engine, maybe they give one to the Q50. I have been on the record as not being the Q50's biggest fan, but I'm kind of wondering if that may help. The 400 horsepower engine with a manual transmission, that could do some good stuff for that car. What do I think of this engine in the Z? I like it. It's a good engine. It really is. My problem with the Q50 goes well beyond the powertrain. In fact, the powertrain is probably the best part of that car. It's a fun one. It's fast. It's exciting. It's a very immediate engine. Good power band. I have only positive things to say about it. Hook it to a manual, put it in a smaller car, you have a recipe for a really enjoyable time. So I'm excited about that. And like I said, 400Z, the thinking is that's what they're gonna call it. Previous models have been named after the displacement. The 300ZX had a 3-liter, the 350 had a 3.5, etc. But obviously now in the days of turbocharging smaller engines, you can't really do that anymore or else it'll be a smaller number, so they're gonna go horsepower instead. That's the thought. But anyway, to me, maybe the most interesting thing here is that this car is being made at all. It's no secret that the Z lineup has been slowly withering, or I guess wilting over time. There hasn't been that much interest in these cars. The current Z is over a decade old, and it feels old. And sports cars in general have kind of lost their luster for a lot of buyers as SUVs have become the norm, or sporty sedans with more practicality. And I'm honestly surprised Nissan feels that it's worth another generation of Z car. This is especially interesting to me because Toyota has made it clear that they cannot financially justify creating a sports car on their own. You know, they partnered with BMW to create the Supra, they partnered with Subaru to make the FRS. Toyota is a massive company with what I assume is way more resources than Nissan, and they can't get a sports car to pencil out for profitability. And here's Nissan saying, no, we can do it, and we can do it with a manual transmission, which is still truly amazing to me that Toyota doesn't offer a manual in the Supra, but whatever. We'll move on. Anyway, I have a theory on how they're justifying this. My thinking is, Nissan has been in bad shape for a while, no secret there. Their product lineup is mostly outdated stuff, a lot of fleet sales to rental car companies. There's not much interest in Nissan anymore. It's just gotten rough. And I wonder if Nissan is thinking a new Z will sort of be a halo car. Not in terms of pricing, like a Lexus LFA or an Audi R8, but sort of in terms of bringing people to the brand, bringing people back. Maybe Nissan is thinking, hey, we want people to see Nissan as exciting and desirable again, not just something you're stuck with when you rent an enterprise rent-a-car. We want to bring people back beyond just the rental companies. So hey, here's our chance to inspire that kind of excitement. The problem with this thinking is, if it is their thinking, once you release the cool car to get people's attention, you have to actually have other good cars to follow up. Audi waited to come out with the R8 until the rest of their lineup was excellent. They had a brand new A4 that year, they had just come out with the A5, they had just come out with the Q7. There were a lot of reasons you'd want to buy something in an Audi showroom after you saw the R8 and it got you excited. Nissan doesn't have that. So the Z will get our attention, then we'll show up and drive the Pathfinder, and it's outdated and crap. And the same is true with the Murano, and then Rogue is kind of low quality, and the sedans are just warmed over rental cars. And unless Nissan is planning some huge product blitz within the next year to coincide with the launch of the Z, to me, I suspect it won't quite have the effect that they're looking for. But my guess is that's their hope, that it will kind of bring people back. And by the way, here's something you're not going to want to hear. One other quick note about the Z. The Nissan lineup with Nissan's resources in 2020 with modern buyer tastes does not have the ability to support two sports cars, in my opinion. My sincere belief is that Nissan sat down and said, we can afford to redesign the GTR or the Z. Which one does it make sense to do? And they chose the Z. And I bet the GTR is going away, at least for a while. It's too expensive to make, the market is too narrow, and I bet the GTR will not survive. The current one will linger for a bit longer, but sales have gone down to an absolute trickle. My guess is the GTR will not see an R36 generation, at least not right away. I think they chose the Z instead. More volume, more accessible. So anyway, that's sad, but moving on, let's talk Z pricing and competitors. Obviously, the biggest competitor is the Supra. And I think the Z will be priced right around there, except with the benefit of being all Nissan as opposed to kind of a Toyota BMW mashup, and with the benefit of having a manual transmission. And if the whispers are correct, the new Z will have 400 horsepower. That's about 20 more than in the top line Supra. So you have more power, you have more sort of purity with the Nissan only thing, like the Z was developed purely by Nissan, and you have 3 pedals. And at that point, on paper, this is an easy victory for Nissan. So I sincerely hope they don't find some way to mess it up. Nissan doesn't necessarily build the greatest cars. Although I have the best respect for a lot of their older stuff, the newer stuff has been disappointing, and I worry about this. Obviously, pricing hasn't yet been announced for the new Z this early in the stage. The Supra starts at like $44,000 for the 4-cylinder, low 50s, 52, 53 for the 6-cylinder. Let's hope the Z is kind of in the middle of that, mid-high 40s. That would be a real hit price point. So that's my thought on the new Z. Love the look, except for the headlights a little, and the grille a lot. And I love the overall idea of it. Nice interior, manual transmission is good, looks like good tech. Twin turbo V6 would be great if it's the one from that Q50. It seems like it'll be fantastic on paper. I am surprised they devoted the resources to this car, given the lack of popularity of sports cars these days. But I'm glad they did. It's always nice to have another Z car, though I do think it probably means the death of the GTR. But there you go. Now you know what I think of the Z, and I can't wait to review the real thing when it comes out, I guess, in about a year or so.